Okay, so I have a little bit of a confession to make, and maybe you guys can tell me if you relate at all. But I started growing tomatoes a few years ago, and I started growing a lot of them. Um, and at the end of my first season, when I had all of these beautiful heirloom ripe tomatoes in my kitchen, I finally realized that I do not like raw tomatoes. So I had kind of jumped into the tomato growing process without really thinking about whether or not that was something I actually liked. And this kind of happened for a lot of other stuff too. I started growing like the standard set of herbs, right? The big one that I really struggled to use was sage. It wasn't something that I actually used in my cooking before I started growing it. And I think that's probably a problem that a lot of us run into. There's kind of like the standard set of like, this is what you grow in a vegetable garden. And we don't necessarily stop to think, is this something that I actually want to eat? Is this something that I want to have in my garden? If you think about it in terms of flowers, maybe you're like, oh, well, you know, so-and-so has this beautiful flower and this beautiful flower, but you've never been around those flowers before, and maybe you end up being like awfully allergic or something. Definitely not considering whether or not a plant interacts with you in a positive way before designing an entire garden around it. It's kind of a blunder. So today we're going to avoid that before it ever happens, and we're going to talk about how to decide what to plant in your garden based on your tastes. So in our last lesson, we actually went over how to figure out why you are gardening and how that why can inform everything else that you do in the garden. So if you missed that video, go back and watch it. It's super, super, super important. But now we are going to build on that and think about exactly what we want to plant. And for me, this is one of the most exciting stages of planting a garden because you get to make this big list of all the things that you want to grow in your garden. And you can go crazy with this. You can make it as long as you want. I want this to be your dream garden. Like, picture what you think you want in your garden and dream it up. Like, write it all down. We're gonna make a big, big list here. Don't worry if you think that it's gonna be too long, if you think that it's gonna be too much for you to fit in your space, or if you think you're not gonna have the effort, any of that. We're not thinking about any of that right now. We're just thinking about what do we actually want in our gardens, what is gonna bring us joy, and what is going to align with our why. You know, if you said that you want to grow a food garden, if you want to save money on groceries, but you don't put any food on your list of things to grow, well, then that might be a problem, right? And vice versa. So definitely consider your why as you're making this list, but let yourself dream big. Dream as much as you want. We are going to narrow everything down as we go, so you kind of do want to start with a really big list here. So I think there's probably a little bit more room for error if you are looking to grow a garden for food than if you're looking to grow a garden for aesthetics, as far as like what your actual tastes are. Personally, I think all plants are beautiful, and obviously some are going to fit in some spaces better than others, but you're going to run into more issues if you are growing a garden for food and you're not considering what you actually enjoy eating. If you are not a spicy pepper person, but you jump on the growing hot peppers trend, you might not have a very good time. So I would recommend for you to start with like all of your favorite recipes. What vegetables are you buying all the time? What vegetables are you eating all the time? And put all of that sort of stuff on your list, and then maybe we can go from there. Maybe we can look for new, exciting, interesting varieties of those things. And if you feel like your list after that is still a bit small, then start expanding into like, okay, well, what do I wish I could try, especially if it's hard to get in a grocery store. These sorts of things definitely can make it onto our big, big list of exciting garden things that we think we might want to grow. At this point, I do have a few plants planted in my garden that are going to produce a fruit that I've never eaten. So for example, my pineapple guava plant, I've never had that. It doesn't exist in stores. There's not really a spot where I could have tried that fruit before planting it, but I am going to take a risk, hope that I like it. It's the same thing with elderberries. I've never actually had elderberries. I know a lot about them. I know what I plan on doing with them once I get them to fruit, but I've never actually tried them. But that does bring up another good point, which is, do you think as you're making this list that you will actually use the things that you are putting on this list? Or do you think that they will just be kind of a fun experiment? Either way, it's okay. Like, this is your garden, you can do what you want. But I think definitely being aware of why you're putting certain things on the list and how that relates back to your big why that we talked about in the last video is going to be really important. So once again, if you are blanking like deer in the headlights, like what do I even want to grow, you can try dividing things into 3 categories. You can think about, okay, here's the food plants, here are the pretty plants or plants for pollinators. If you don't super care about that sort of thing, but you're growing a food garden, you are still going to want to have some flowers in that. And then maybe useful plants like your herbs, or maybe you want to grow plants for dyes or something like that. So if you start with categories, maybe that'll make it easier for you to kind of fill in the blanks and fill in what you want. This is also not a binding list by any means. You can absolutely change your mind later. Actually, I encourage you to change your mind later if you want to, especially year after year as you go through gardening, you will end up changing your mind quite a lot. So this is not set in stone. Do not limit yourself on what you think that you want to grow. Even if it feels completely impossible, like if you already know that you live somewhere where this certain plant can't grow, still put it on your list because you might end up being surprised. There are plenty of ways to grow plants in regions where they wouldn't normally grow, and we are going to go over some of that later in the course. All right, so these first 2 lessons have been kind of dreaming and planning, and once again, you can do this in your planner that you can download from my website below, or you can do this in a notebook. But in the next lesson, we are going to get into a little bit of like harder stuff, not too hard, don't worry. But we are going to get into climate information and how that is actually going to probably whittle your list down a little bit. Like I said, there are ways to grow things in climates where they wouldn't normally grow. Some things are going to be possible for you to do, and other things are not going to be possible for you to do based on cost, space, etc. But we are going to go through all of that in the following lessons. So I hope to see you there. If you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe and make sure that you are following through in the course, and all of that is linked down below. I will see you in the next lesson, and until then, happy gardening.